It's the 18th of June, and it's been a few weeks since my last upload about the entire issue regarding my human rights. As I've mentioned in my uploads, I'm born and raised in County Kerry. Worked here all my life, studied in Limerick, and qualified as a teacher in primary education in 2011, 2012. In 2015 I got married, and as I've mentioned, I gave birth. And since a wonderful experience such as childbirth, I experienced also the horrendous ordeal of my private life being intruded upon, and very serious transgressions that were perpetrated against me as a new mother. So the issue of human rights that I'm going to touch on in this upload is basically with regard to the issue of denigration, defamation, disinformation and displacement. So this is a difficult issue. It's not easy to discuss, but there's quite a lot that's involved, and 100% of it is inexcusable, intolerable and unforgivable. So as a teacher that had experienced what I had experienced and mentioned in previous uploads and had recovered from and moved on from, I had been working as a teacher. And since being married, I worked after I gave birth, and since experiencing transgressions, the level of denigration that has been caused for me has been malicious, premeditated, orchestrated and intentional. This also involves the aspect of hate crime, and this issue of denigration and the quality of living and the quality of a person's livelihood is a very serious issue for any woman in 2020, and especially for a woman that's qualified. So the denigration, as I've mentioned in all my uploads, has affected all aspects of my hierarchy of needs. The other issue with regard to defamation has been very dangerous. What has been claimed about Emer Griffin McElligott has been unsubstantiated and has been intentionally to desecrate and disrespect my character and my reputation, and that has caused economic loss and the loss of professional opportunities that other people have taken advantage of and that have exploited, and that others have obstructed also. People that don't even know me, that have had no interaction with me, that have not worked with me, have claimed I'm irresponsible. They have claimed I have worked in professions that I have not worked as. They have claimed I'm unreliable, apparently. This is a person that on 2 occasions worked two different jobs, over 50 to 60 hours per week, between 1999 and 2005. So this is a person that has a time schedule, time management, transferable skills, etc., etc. And these are anonymous individuals that have belittled, demeaned, and disrespected my capabilities, my expertise, my skills, and my talents. Along with the defamation, there's the issue of the disinformation. So the disinformation is not so much about misrepresenting my character and my competencies. With regard to competencies, it's actually quite amusing that there have been individuals involved in this entire fiasco of vendetta, it's the only polite way I'd call it, um, to basically have commented on my intellectual capacities as being very, debilitated. The insults about my intellectual capacities and the insults that people have commented on regarding my intellect, that they would have no IQ score for it all, and that have no knowledge or consideration for the damages done to my bodily integrity without consent, that have been quite damaging. As I've mentioned in previous uploads, there have been bodily integrity violations and there's been physical injuries. And as a woman, not even 40 years of age, that has endured what I've endured since giving birth, and I only gave birth 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I'm not doing too bad considering that there has been medical care and medical treatment withheld from me as well. On one occasion, I went to have a gash on my head checked and treated. I waited, it was an emergency, and it wasn't looked after, I wasn't treated, and I ended up having to come away, and I had to treat it myself. On another occasion, I was getting heart palpitations. I went to South Dock, and I was told that there was no healthcare provision available where I have health insurance. These are just two examples. For a disability application form that I've sought, it took 3 application forms to get the accurate information. That's just with regards to my medical care. So this information isn't so much about the defamation of my character and reputation and good name, but the disinformation about circumstances surrounding the problems that people have caused for me. As I've mentioned, over 15 years ago, over 10 years ago, I commenced my journey of recovery. People that are involved in this fiasco of falsehoods have taken it upon themselves to be quite presumptuous and have made very dangerous assumptions about their own capabilities and have basically inflated their credentials and their capabilities to the extent that they have actually tried to take responsibility for work of my own I did myself over 10 years ago, and tried to actually think that they had a part to play in my own self-taught work, my self-research study, whatever personal development programs and whatnot that I have worked on and developed and planned. So that's just one aspect of how there's been disinformation. There's been disinformation about personal experience that I've had at home and abroad. As I've mentioned before, there was someone actually quite cheeky enough to do a little bit of investigative work about my past and compiled a very interesting collection of tales about my personal life without actually consulting me. So that's just one aspect of the disinformation. And the tales weren't exactly accurate either for any other person's interest to be judging or making assumptions or any calculated assessments of me either. So the issue of disinformation with regards to personal experiences is quite serious also. As a very private person, as I have been since 2005, after a very difficult experience, I spent up to 2014 in very heavy studies as a primary teacher, as in many self-taught and distant learning courses. So that's just one aspect that people have disinformed others about with regards to my experience, my credentials, my expertise, etc., etc. Um, the other aspect is that at one stage, after being married and having given birth, um, there was actually individuals that had made claims or comments with regards to mental health. There have been people that have defamed my intellectual competence, my emotional competence, and they haven't experienced a speck in the ocean of what I've experienced. Not even in 4 years would a woman or not even in 40 years would a woman that is married have experienced what I've experienced in the past 4 years. It's been so horrendous as a new mother to have had the ordeal that I've had, and the disinformation and the lies and the intrusions of people that have intruded upon my private life and that have participated in obstacles and obstructions of a mother against a mother intentionally to damage my role as a mother and as a wife. So the intrusions commenced when my child was only 2 years of age, and that's quite difficult for any new mother to experience, because we all know how it is for new mothers, for pregnant women, etc. So the disinformation that people have taken upon themselves to discuss about a person that they don't know has been quite liberal, and they've had quite a free tongue about what they've had to say without actually having had the experience. So they've also implied issues with regards mental health. The first experience I have had with recovery was, as I've mentioned, in 2006. I involved myself with mental health services as a part of my recovery plan. That was a personal conscious choice. I consciously also disengaged from that service when I no longer required that service. And as an adult, that's my right, that's my decision, and not anyone else is to be thinking in any way or from any perspective that they have any role in another person's decision making, unless we all know the circumstances. And when you don't live with a person and when you aren't interacting with a person, then you certainly don't have any input or relevance in another person's private life in any respect. So this is part of the defamation that I've had to tolerate. And with regards to the issue of mental health, I experienced breaches of confidentiality. I experienced 2 unannounced, 2 unrequired and unnecessary visits to my private home that I had not made contact with any medical service about, and they were unexpected visits that I had not requested. And these matters involve breaches of confidentiality and intrusions that were unwarranted. So on another occasion, another 2 occasions, there was, as I've mentioned, 2 visits by mental health practitioners. Hadn't met them before, didn't know them, hadn't been displaying any symptoms of mental health debilitating or any issues like that would require such as, but this was a tactic of an abuse of a position or role that a person was able, in their mind, even though it was unnecessary, to implement. So without any knowledge of who was breaching my privacy, I was unlawfully detained on 2 occasions. On the second occasion, um, both occasions were only 26 days, um, both only since I had been married. Hadn't, as I've mentioned in previous uploads, been in any psychiatric ward. Twice I had the experience of such an occasion arising, and that was only because I had been married. So this is 2020, and I wasn't involved with any mental health services, hadn't been a patient, and they just arrived at my marital home. So I don't know how any other woman would be reacting to these kind of circumstances in 2020, for strangers to come to you and say, we're going to give you a little holiday at the hospital, isn't quite pleasant when you're living a normal, healthy, productive daily lifestyle. On the second occasion, it was claimed that I was an involuntary patient. Voluntary. My choice to depart from the hospital was my own. The nurse was notified, and whether she signed off or out on it, that was her role. I had informed the nurse at the hospital, where my belongings had been stolen from me, that I was departing. There had been reason for it. There had been no reason for me to be there, and it was my choice. So I came away, and since then there has been manipulation of the facts. There has been defamation of my character, competencies, and my mental health history, which has only involved very minimal involvement. As a teacher, I have not displayed erratic or impulsive or aggressive behaviour. These are dangerous accusations that have been claimed against me that are completely unsubstantiated, unproven, and completely defamatory. On another occasion, there were actually individuals contacting principals and employers to say that I was unfit for work, unfit for purpose, unsuitable, etc., etc. My postgraduate study, where I became qualified primary teacher, was actually a very, it was pretty good qualification. And that is the most insulting aspect of this, to have worked so hard and for people to be chin wagging and making calls and intruding where they're not wanted and claiming to be in a position to discuss another person, falsifying their role and capacity with a person that they don't even know, has all been a part of my experience, not just since I got married and gave birth in 2015, but also over a decade ago when the first vendetta was caused for me. So that was one part of my chapter in my hometown, where I have been very, very, very seriously damaged and wronged, unjustifiably, inexcusably, and without any consideration or remorse by the guilty culprits. The other aspect of this is not just the disinformation. The disinformation includes other aspects with regard to what I have not been informed about and what other people have been informed about when guilty culprits are contacting individuals and obstructing assistance that I am entitled to. Displacement is the other topic of this vendetta, fiasco, charade of human rights violations that I've also endured. Displacement. I would consider displacement on 2 occasions from my marital home unnecessitated, not adhered to appropriately or lawfully, and implemented unnecessarily. So the displacement of any person from not just their comfort zone, but from their home, from where you are familiar, where you have grown up, where you have lived, where you have worked, where you are known, where you feel safe, for any woman in 2020 is not tolerable at all. Due to the aspect of this situation being hate crime, which means basically people are very uncomfortable with confronting their transgressions against me, that they're not prepared to compensate for, that they're not prepared to repair, and that they're not prepared to explain, has meant that as a part of this issue of hate crime, um, people, individuals, have thought displacement of an individual the easiest option to avoid or obstruct my judicial rights from being respected. And on the note of judicial rights, the legal violations I have experienced are absolutely outrageous. I'm nearly 40 years of age. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have, as I've mentioned, blown my trumpet about my personal achievements that I'm pretty proud of, regardless of what other people want to be disrespecting. But as a President's Award recipient, and as a volunteer worker in my community, and as a teacher, to be having this experience with legal violations and legal obstructions occurring while anyone and everyone has been saying what they like about a person that they don't even know, but they're just not comfortable with having a positive, productive, fulfilling livelihood that has been worked for, that has been achieved, and that has been earned, regardless of all the odds and regardless of all the obstacles that haters and shamers and defamers have placed on my path. So, the rights and entitlements that I have had the experience of being disrespected by those not adhering to their own professional morals, codes, and ethics have intentionally just disregarded guidance, advice, and advocacy. The professional capacity of anyone in the legal system is to defend the rights and the good name of an individual that's been wronged or vindicated. And I have been wronged and vindicated unfairly and defamed since 2005, which was an experience I'd moved on from. But since giving birth, this situation has raised its ugly head again, and there's a lot of ugly behaviour when it comes to marital rights in particular. The information, as I've said, that people have imposed and intruded upon and altered is quite dangerous. And the obstacles and obstructions are quite fathomable, considering the extensive knowledge and information that would be uncovered with what would be required in an inquiry, basically. And as an individual that has adhered to policies and procedures in my own profession, whether it be in paid work or whether it was in voluntary work, I'm quite insulted that there are individuals that think they're in a position to discredit and disrespect another qualified adult without having good practice practiced by themselves. So the other issue with regards to the rights and entitlements is the provision of services. As a new mother and as a victim of these individuals that are intruding upon my private life, that have contacted agencies that I have sought assistance from and that have defamed me, the issue of supports and services being obstructed is also quite dangerous. But as I've mentioned, there have also been obstacles with regards to my personal calls, my postal correspondence, my online activity, etc. So, as I've mentioned in previous uploads, my internet activity is minimal. I don't even like the internet. I don't like technology. And I don't have broadband. And I don't have a bank account. I don't have a car because my body's so badly damaged. And I don't have physiotherapy because I couldn't get a referral for physiotherapy. All the relevant ombudsmen have been contacted, and I have not gotten appropriate acknowledgements because there have been such dangerous obstructors putting obstacles in the way to prevent my constitutional rights from being respected. So it's not just the constitutional rights, there's the marital rights. I think any mother and father that have any of their daughters married, and especially with children, any daughter that's jilted and disrespected in any way, be it after a year, be it after 10 years, regardless, that's not anyone else's position to make judgment calls or comments about. But I think any parent would be quite disgusted if their daughter had endured the experience that I've endured because of these circumstances that have been caused for me, that are intentionally being caused as a means of the denigration and the defamation and the disinformation and the displacement. So I have marital rights, and on 4 occasions I have sought for my rights to be respected, and they have been intentionally ignored. This is 2020. I'm a teacher, and people have intruded and defamed and discussed matters that they are not in a position to be discussing. So this brings me on to my work as a teacher and as a creative and as a humanitarian and as a volunteer worker, etc., etc., etc. Since before even 1999, I've been contributing to my community, and people have been cheeky enough to discredit and disrespect voluntary work. And I think that's quite disgraceful, because whether it's a half an hour in a charity shop or whether it's 100,000 hours out in Africa, any bit of voluntary work is always invaluable. So this is what I've had to contend with. But what I take great exception to is not only just the choice of profession that people have claimed that I have worked as, when I have only worked as a teacher or an administrator, or as I've worked in the hotel industry and hospitality industry, but people discussing my professional and educational past has also been a liberty that these people have brazenly discussed without having any involvement or interaction with me. So, as I mentioned, the recovery work that I commenced in 2006 has been arduous and steadfast for nearly 10 years. I was studying various educational topics and matters regarding to not just curriculum, classroom material, but also with regards to personal development. A lot, as I've said from the previous uploads, involves the issue of intellectual and creative property theft. It has come to my knowledge that there has been a little bit of false acclaim with regards to work that I have put together, created, but not shared, but yet it has been looted by other individuals. That's pretty hard to come to terms with. If a person is creative in any way, the creative process, especially when after experiencing what I experienced over a decade ago, and with regard to present experiences, the creative process is very personal and private. And even to be in a process of self-healing, as I'm attempting on my own with very heavy, difficult physical issues, while the physical issues outweigh any resemblance or signifier of any mental incapacity to function as a normal human being, my burden of treating physical ailments all single-handedly is another private part of the process that people are just not in any way ever to intrude upon. But unfortunately, that has also been a part of my experience where people have taken liberties to intrude and helped themselves to work that I have done and have taken credit for work that I have done. So that's all pretty quite insulting. And with the injuries that I've experienced, it's all very serious. So with political issues these days, fortunately, there's a lot of emphasis being placed on mental health. And my personal experience with regards to this would be the issue of the individuals that intruded and involved themselves in my experience and that were not mentally healthy and that caused harm. These people were ignored. They were not obligated to be treated. They were not intruded upon to be, you know, in any way admitted to any psychiatric ward. And as a consequence, very serious damage and harm was caused. While this has happened, as I've mentioned, I've had the audacious individuals intruding upon me with regards to matters that I find unfathomable for them to be discussing. Seems as they're not actually in any way functional for me in their role. That means there isn't any practitioner of the mind that I am engaged with in any way that would be in any position to discuss my private life or any other aspect about me. And from what has already been discussed, it has been defamatory. So this is all what I'm tolerating in Tralee, County Kerry, the southwest of Ireland, my hometown, and only since 2014, 2015, this is the nightmare I've experienced, and I should be enjoying motherhood. So the aspect of recovery that is most serious in this situation is the conscious decision of professionals to ignore the mental health issues of people that have done damage while targeting a fully functioning, healthy, mentally healthy woman that has been victimized, violated, and wronged in society, and that hasn't been respected in his or her capacity or competencies, as is in my situation. So the life challenges that I've had to overcome have been quite numerous and plentiful, simply due to haters that have damaged my career, that have damaged my professional opportunities, that have damaged my economic earnings, that have taken credit for my work, that have tried to take credit for my personal development that I worked on single-handedly over the past 15 years, and that have also exploited, not just financially, but politically, socially, culturally, also. So the exploitation from my good work has been immense, and I have experienced every aspect of the Constitution and the Declaration being violated, and there has not been amends since Vendetta number 1 in 2006, and there hasn't been amends or acknowledgement from ombudsmen or the politicians or the authorities that have just not consulted me with regards to the wrongdoings and transgressions that were perpetrated, but have also not considered the seriousness of the transgressions that I'm experiencing, and have not been informed with regards to the truth of the situations that I'm experiencing. There have been strangers manipulating and maneuvering in my private life and my experience of marriage and birth and so on and so on, without having any consideration for the lies that they have told and the damage that they have done as a consequence. So for civil liberties and for people that they're saying that, that if they're support workers for civil liberties, etc., we don't actually contact the person, or we don't actually have direct contact, then I'm actually quite baffled how they consider themselves support workers at all. For civil liberties to be damaged for a teacher in 2020, a mother even as well, this is all absolutely horrendous. But this is what is happening. And there has been a very dangerous obstruction of my constitutional and human rights. And as a consequence, I have suffering, physical suffering. And they have also imposed denigration while they have prospered from my work, and while they have prospered from my marriage, and while they have prospered from circumstances that they have not done the work for. As regards the wrongdoings, the amount of wrongdoings that I've experienced since giving birth are so immense, so varied. It would be hard to calculate how many offences and wrongdoings and transgressions I've experienced. And it's not any figment of the imagination, it's not any delusion, but there have been attempts of mind games that mental health and mentality is the issue apparently, when in fact the paperwork says otherwise, which also brings me to the point of the displacements I've experienced and the belongings of mine that have been stolen from me while displaced from my marital home, that were not retrieved and that were not an issue that was confronted amongst the other issues that were raised also as a consequence of the unlawful intrusion of services that had no business intruding upon me at all, while other mentally unhealthy individuals had inflicted a lot of dangerous circumstances and done a lot of damage without any bother or intrusion from mental health services confronting them at all. So that's a peculiar circumstance, I think. And the issue with regards to all of these things that have happened for me as a consequence of these people that have intentionally tried to put away a problem that they can't afford to confront on many levels is the issue of procedures with regards to how problems are rectified and resolved. I have adhered to procedures. The procedures have been ignored, and as a consequence, it's apparently a non-running issue, and there have been unlawful, more than just the two issues with regards to being displaced from my marital home for no reason. There was no violence, there was no aggression. I was happily gardening on one occasion, and out of the blue, they just decided I wasn't a patient of theirs, wasn't attending any clinic or service, and I was just picked up and brought off. So this is what happens in human rights vendetta, and this is what I'm constantly trying to raise awareness about with professionals that are obligated to help people like me, that people, culprits, offenders, are intentionally denigrating, disrespecting, displacing, defaming, etc., and disinforming others about also. So the procedures with regards to the transgressions I've experienced have ranged from the physical to the mental and to the personal and legal and familial. None of these issues have been rectified, and that's why I've had to contact the human rights agencies, hopefully with the intention that they'd be able to assist in this very serious issue that people have thought excusable due to their own deduction of why they find it acceptable for them to exact justice because of their faults. There has been no rationale to these people's justification. I think it's inexcusable to trespass into a person's private life. I think it's inexcusable and intolerable to trespass into a person's livelihood, etc., etc., etc. So there has been no justification to obstruct my rights from being respected. Um, as I've said, I have worked as a teacher from 2003 up to 2016 after I gave birth. Only a law-abiding citizen with a clear, clean Garda vetting record is ever able to enter into a classroom. As a recipient of the Duke of Edinburgh Award and the President's Award, and as a universal light worker that has also been damaged, I find it unfathomable how people have tried to explain how these misdemeanors or misbehaviours or anything against the grain could have been perpetrated by a person like Emer Griffin McElligott. So this is the defamation and disinformation also. Basically, this upload is for the interest of the United Nations. This is for the interest of the politicians that people in this locality have obstructed from assisting me. The threat of displacement due to my marital rights being an issue for those to confront, amongst the other issues that have been caused for me with regards to being a mother and with regards to the physical ailments that I have experienced without medical care. I have submitted my victim impact report to the state agencies and I have sought state protection. I live on my own, and as a victim of these wrongdoings, it's very easy for people to say, as we know, what they want, when they want, or who they want. So I've tried to take the proper measures and procedures that would be advised to safeguard my safety from other people's lies. I have still not received state protection, but I am pretty sure that I am entitled, considering all that has been taken, damaged, and stolen and owed to me. There has been the obstruction of justice intentionally due to the exacerbation of offences that I've experienced by people disrespecting my role as a mother and wife and teacher. The obstruction of justice isn't just because of recent events, but because of older events that regard the issue of sexual assault and revenge porn that were not investigated, that I still suffer from today, that I live daily with, and also the issue of the circumstances that I'm mentioning with regards to hate crime. So this is uninvestigated. There has not been an inquiry. There has not been an acknowledgement. And I'm experiencing these circumstances on my own. And if it wasn't for work previously conducted single-handedly over 10 years ago, I wonder would I be coping as positively as I am coping at the moment. As a new mother of only 4 years, and to have experienced what I experienced only 2 years ago is any mother's nightmare. So these are the circumstances of the human rights violations I'm experiencing. Locally, on a local level, it's quite horrendous to be from a town, to have not offended people as people have falsely claimed. People have made the most outrageous accusations that they have no substance to. The lies have been very dangerous. So at a local level even, for these people to be in any way acknowledged when they don't know a person, when they can't say that they've engaged or interacted with the person or haven't lived with the person or haven't involved themselves with the person, then I find it very dangerous for women to be on their own. and for any services that would facilitate or accommodate guilty offenders of human rights, then I'm very concerned about the capacity of those individuals also that would abuse their position to defend or protect the indefensible. So there's all these kind of matters being raised. It's not easy, but this is what's happening. I have my application form in with the Supreme Court of Human Rights that has been obstructed. I've contacted the UNOHCHR, and there has not been the acknowledgement that I require for my human rights to be respected. People have taken the liberty to discuss my private life without actually consulting me or without even having knowledge of me. So this has involved the violation of my technological data or privacy, my technological privacy, my online data, my online content of emails or whatever, and people being contacted to obstruct the assistance that I'm entitled to. So this is a very dangerous situation. The Ombudsman are aware as a mother. It's absolutely unfathomable how anyone that has availed or exploited or taken advantage of my credentials, my expertise or my skills or my talents, and taken awful liberties to disrespect my rights, how that is actually tolerable is quite shocking. But this is, what's happening, and I'm worried about the mentality of any service or agency that's in any way accommodating that kind of mentality. Recovery isn't easy, and mental health is a very serious issue these days. And the symptoms of mental illness that I've witnessed throughout the years is absolutely frightening. And the consequences thereof also are actually quite devastating. So people that are dangerous with their mouth and like to chit chat and say what they want about people without having substance to what they're saying, and decide to discuss matters that they shouldn't be discussing, are all very serious issues. So, as protection from these individuals that are guilty offenders against the constitution of the country and that have disrespected the constitution of the country, that have disrespected agencies and services and the roles and power of agencies and services is a huge concern for me, because as I've said, as a teacher, I taught by the book, and I wasn't flinging anything around my classroom as an aggressive teacher or anything of the sort. So I find it unfathomable that any other adults, qualified or not, would be displaying unprofessional or, just any unprofessional behaviour or any misconduct that would jeopardise their capacity and function and role. So this is my upload for state protection. I live alone. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm a peaceful, quiet, living citizen. The transgressions and offences have been immense. There have been lies and falsehoods and complaints that are completely outrageous and completely false. I'm in the southwest of Ireland, Tralee County, Kerry. There are people thinking they're in a position to falsify documents with regards my personal information, with regards to my marital rights, etc. I have adhered to procedures with complaints regarding what I've experienced since 2017. It's now 2020, and I'm treating physical illness on my own. I live alone, and there aren't any adults that are in any position to intrude upon me or think they're in any capacity to have a decision-making input regarding my private life, livelihood, etc., etc. So, with the government of Ireland and the human rights agencies that have been deterred or scaremongered or negotiated out of providing assistance to a law-abiding citizen, ever kindly mind actually contacting me, please. I've sent my details on my applications. I'm in Tralee, County Kerry. My contact details are clear. Um, this is kind of important because human rights are actually everyone's entitlement, and I don't like my good work in my community, my hometown, my county, being jeopardised. People have stolen quite a lot from me throughout the years already, as it is with regards to my profession and my career. But as a mother, I think, any mother would know what the loss of a child is, especially when it's around such serious violations and falsehoods. So that's as much as I'll say for this upload. Um, all heavy topics, pretty much repetitive, but this is now 2020 and it's 3 years on. So I'm wondering, how long does it take for politicians, authorities, and human rights agencies to acknowledge the truth and reality of a very difficult situation where people are manipulating, manoeuvring the facts and figures and dates and whatnot to their own liking, but not to the actual factual um, reality or resemblance of what is actually is. So that's all I'll say for that upload. This is for the UN to rectify also. So I'd like my stake protection, please. Um, I've contributed positively and people have exploited me immensely, and I'm experiencing medical issues that have not been treated as is my constitutional right, etc., etc., etc. So this is Seymour Griffin McElligott, and I'd appreciate these uploads actually being acknowledged.